Hello, everyone. This is Dorie Clark, and I am here with Christian Busch. He is the author of the new book, Connect the Dots. And this is part of our weekly interview series for Newsweek Better. We're going to talk today about how to create your own good luck, which is a topic that I think all of us are probably pretty interested in these days. And in his book, Connect the Dots, Christian is going to explain exactly how all of this works and how we can harness the tools of serendipity to our favor. Christian Busch, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Dorie. Great to be here.
Absolutely. And welcome to everyone who is tuning in. Please type your name and where you're dialing in from into the chat box so that we can greet you and say hi. And we are going to be taking your questions for Christian, talking about serendipity and how to create your own good luck throughout the course of our time together. So, Christian, the first question that I have is how did this actually become a thing for you? I know that in your just from knowing you, I know that in your personal life, serendipity and harnessing serendipity has been something that you are very interested in. But what's the origin story? How did this actually become your thing?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question. It really started. So when I was younger, I used to be that kid. I was kicked out of high school, had to repeat a year, transferred my reckless lifestyle into my driving style, probably helped the unofficial world record of how many dustbins or trash cans you can knock over on your way to school. And then one day wasn't so lucky anymore and crashed into 4 parked cars, all cars completely destroyed, including my own. And I won't forget the policeman who came to the scene and who said, "Oh my God, he's still alive." And so this idea that I was supposed to be dead, that stuck with me. And, I asked myself all these weird questions. If I would have died, who would have come to my funeral? Who would have actually cared? Was it all worth it? And at that point, I only had depressing answers. And so it took me on this intense search for meaning, trying to figure out what am I interested in? What's the meaning of everything? I started reading this amazing book, highly recommended, especially for times like these at the moment. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which is all about how do we find meaning in crisis. And what I realized is what I enjoy doing the most is connecting ideas, connecting people, and seeing how they fit together. And so, in my work then as community builder, entrepreneur, social entrepreneur, and later in academia, what I found fascinating is that the most inspiring, successful, purpose-driven people, they seem to have something in common, which is that they intuitively connect the dots. They intuitively see something in the unexpected and then turn that into positive outcomes. And by doing this, they cultivate serendipity. And so I got really excited by this, seeing it in my own life. It's my own life philosophy. It's, day-to-day practices. But also then, the curiosity as an academic was, is there a science-based framework for this? And so that's what I got really excited about. Is there a framework for this? And then are there exercises we can all use to really make that happen in our own lives?
Oh, I think that's really interesting, Christian. Thank you so much for sharing that. We want to say hi to some of the great folks who are tuning in here. We have Javi from North Carolina. Christina's here from Cincinnati. Rosinda's joining us from Madrid. We have Maya tuning in. Denise from California. We have Rainer from Heidelberg. We've got a LinkedIn user from Cambridgeshire, UK. Jeannie is here from Virginia. We've got a LinkedIn user from Toronto. Cheryl from Minneapolis, and many more. We're so glad to have you. We're here speaking with Christian Busch. He's the author of the book, Connect the Dots, talking about how to create good luck in our own lives. Now, Christian, what is it that prevents people so often from taking advantage of serendipity? Because we know, in theory, there are opportunities all around us, the sort of proverbial pennies on the sidewalk that I think for so many of us, we fail to pick them up. We fail to even notice them. So if serendipity and good luck are out there for the taking, what is it that's getting in our way?
Yeah. Well, there's mostly three barriers, right, that hold us back. And one is really self-limiting beliefs. We all, or a lot of us, have this small imposter sitting here, right, who says, "Oh my God, I'm not ready, I'm not worthy." So imagine you sit in a meeting and you have this unexpected, brilliant idea that comes, and then you might not bring it up because you feel, you're not ready and yada yada. Or we can talk more about other examples, but it's really this kind of that we might hold ourselves back even if we see something by actually acting on it. The second one is really, I think a lot of times we airbrush serendipity out of our stories, even though they might be there. We all probably have taken our CV and gone to our next employer and said, "Hey, I did this and then I did this and then I did this. Yeah, or maybe you just ran into someone at a conference and they unexpectedly told you about a new opportunity and then you went with it. But by, in a way, airbrushing it out of our stories, because we think we have more control if we have it in the story, we, in a way, delegitimize it for a lot of people, especially in organizations. And I'm sure we'll talk more about this. And then the third one, which I think is the most important one, is, to your point, that we continuously underestimate how probable the improbable is, how probable the unexpected is. What do I mean by this? There's one of my favorite examples or experiments where they take people, and I'd love to ask everyone in the audience, maybe if you want to put in the chat, do you consider yourself to be a lucky or an unlucky person? Because I'll tell you in a second, but if you want to put just lucky or unlucky, I think, Dorie, you're probably relatively lucky, you consider, or where are you on that?
I feel like I'm sort of in the middle. I don't consider myself unlucky because that seems like so depressing. But also I often feel like I have to sort of fight for things. I have to sort of slog for things. So I don't know. Is there a middle answer to this?
Yeah, it's fascinating because it's really and Isabella says lucky, Gina lucky. That's wonderful to hear. We seem to have a very lucky room here. And the reason I'm asking this is that a lot of times what we expect to see, we start to see because then we look for it and we start seeing it. What do I mean with this? So there's an experiment, for example, where they took people who self-identify as very lucky. So people who say, good things tend to happen to me. And then people who self-identify as very unlucky. So people who say, bad things always happen to me, I'm always in accidents, and so on. And we probably all know people on this continuum from like very lucky to unlucky. And so they take one of each and they say, walk down the street, go into a coffee shop, grab a coffee, and then we'll have our interview. Now, what they don't tell them is that there's hidden cameras along the street and inside the coffee shop. There's a 5-pound note in front of the coffee shop. And inside the coffee shop, there's one seat next to this extremely successful businessman who can make big dreams happen. Now, the lucky person walks down the street, sees the 5-pound note, the money, picks it up, goes inside the shop, orders the coffee, sits next to the businessman, they have a conversation, exchange business cards, potential opportunity coming out of it. The unlucky person, walks down the street, steps over the 5-pound note, so doesn't see it, goes inside the shop, orders the coffee, sits next to the businessman, ignores the businessman, and that's it. Now, at the end of the day, they ask both people, how was your day today? And so the lucky person says, it was amazing. I found money in the street, made new friends, and potential opportunity coming out of it. The unlucky person just says, well, nothing really happened. And the reason I'm telling this story, I mean, we can probably talk about the second part later in terms of, it helps us to have a bit of extroversion in terms of connecting with people. But for closet introverts like myself, there's a lot of hope in like calm, quiet sources, right? Finding something in a book or on the street, right? The money, or taking another road to work and then seeing an old book and thinking, oh my God, that could be a podcast. So the point here being, once we expect that there could be something, there could be money in the street, for example, you will find more money. And so it's really about that kind of like, if we underestimate how probable the unexpected is, then we tend to miss serendipity all the time.
I think that's really powerful. Thank you so much. We are here with Christian Busch. He's the author of the new book, Connect the Dots. And we have been talking about how to create your own good luck, how to create your own serendipity in life. If you want to check out Christian's book, here's the URL. You can go to bit.ly/connectdots now. This is not a typo. It's now. So make sure you go do that and check that out. We're all about connecting the dots. And especially if you're enjoying this conversation with Dr. Christian Busch, he's a professor at NYU, you can hit the like button and hit the share button so that your friends can benefit from it as well on whatever social channel that you are watching it on. So thank you all for being here. And we want to just also say hi to some of the great folks who are tuning in to join us. Anil is here from New Delhi. Brenda's here from Florida. We've got Lisa from Northern California, Michaela from Ottawa, Steve's here from Malawi, Ed is in Massachusetts, we've got Holly from Southern California, Roxana from Bucharest, Geraldo from Sao Paulo, Nora from Bahrain, Yasmina is here from Paris, we have a LinkedIn user from Kansas City, Annette's from Southern California. This is great. Mia's here from Chicago, and many more. We're so glad to have all of you. And we are taking your questions. Feel free to type them in the chat box for Christian Busch, author of Connect the Dots. Christian, one thing that I've been wondering about now, the pandemic, of course I understand you can probably like see it either way, but the pandemic obviously cut out our opportunities for a lot of things that we would think about as organic networking opportunities. You're not really going to conferences so much anymore. In many cases, people aren't even going out to eat, or they're not even going to coffee shops. Those were often the engines of serendipity that we all had, and they were taken away. And I heard many people say, "Oh, during the pandemic, you had to be so deliberate. You had to schedule everything. It's not like you can just bump into somebody. It's like you have to make a plan." Did that kill serendipity? What do we do about these constrained, hybrid, remote, whatever circumstances? And how can we still make our own good luck in spite of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's three parts to it. One is really that idea that, what has been taken away from us, of course, is this kind of emotional connection. I mean, Dorie, I loved hanging out with you in person back in the days, right, when it was still possible to do that easily. But also now, once we reframe that, Zoom and WebEx is our own private plane, right? I can be in your living room without going through customs and like flying over to you, and then I can do that with the next person. And so essentially, it makes it potentially that we communicate with more people if we wanted to. But then second, to your point, unfortunately, all these unexpected collisions, right? So the water cooler moments, especially for younger people where if you're in a company and then every day you could run into the boss of your boss who gives you the next big opportunity, or you name it. And so those moments have been taken away in the physical space. And so I'm a big fan actually of random coffee trials, where companies essentially take people from across the company and say, hey, like, tell us when you're free. And then they randomly match them across different departments, across different hierarchy levels. And so essentially with an inspiring prompt, saying, go for half an hour digital coffee and ask each other, what's your key challenge at the moment? How can I help? And what that does is it both cultivates serendipity within the organization, but also it recreates that sense of belonging that we've lost, because we always communicate with the same people, right? Always the same 5 people we're in a team with versus the rest of the organization. But then, Laurie, the third point, Laurie, I think is the most important one, which is we can take a lot of the practices that we can do offline, online, on how we can cultivate serendipity. And so to give you one example, it's the hook strategy. It's one of my absolute favorites. The whole idea is essentially to say, how do you build memorable talking points into a conversation with your boss, with your colleague, with your uncle, with your sister, whoever it is, whatever you're interested in at the moment, so that they can connect the dots to whatever they are most interested in at the moment. And so to give an example, Ollie Barrett in London, wonderful entrepreneur. If you would ask him this dreaded "what do you do" question that puts people into boxes, he would say something like, I'm a technology entrepreneur, recently read into the philosophy of science, but what I'm really excited about is playing the piano. And so what he's doing here is he's giving you 3 potential hooks where you could be like, oh my God, such a coincidence. My sister is teaching on the philosophy of science. You should give a guest lecture. Oh my God, such a coincidence. We're hosting piano matinees. You should drop by. I'm a big fan of making a serendipity journal where we write down 2 or 3 interests we have at the moment. In my case, for example, how to bring the serendipity mindset into curricula and companies around the world. And then really building that into every conversation. You're coming 5 minutes too late to a meeting. I'm so sorry. I was just thinking about how we can get that mindset into education institution, but now I'm here and I'm excited. And so the point being, the more we can do that, the more other people can connect the dots for us. And so there's a lot of these practices that we can take virtually as well as we could physically before that.
I think that's a great point, Christian. Thank you for raising that. We want to say hi to some of the great folks tuning in. Isabella's here from London. Sameh is here from Michigan. Japar is tuning in from Zurich, one of our great recognized expert friends. Brian from Medford, New Jersey. Kathy's here from St. Petersburg. We have Gabriel from Mexico. We have Ferhat from Turkey. Dilek is also from Turkey. Peter is here, I think, maybe from Germany or from Scandinavia, judging from your name, Peter. We have lots of good folks joining us. So it's a pleasure to have all of you. Again, we're here with Christian Busch. His new book is Connect the Dots. And here is the URL if you would like to check it out. Connect Dots now. Just to really hammer it home for all of you. So please type your questions for Christian into the chat box. And one, Abdallah from Saudi Arabia, he's just cutting right to the chase. Christian, he wants takeaways here. How would you encourage others to connect the dots? Give us the meat here, brother. How do we become more lucky? Inquiring minds want to know.
That's a great question. So 2 practices that I'm a big fan of is, first one is really around saying, getting into the modus of whenever you have a conversation, thinking about, is there one idea I can connect this to, or one person I can introduce this person to? I think, when you look at someone like Dorie or Peter, who's here as well. Peter, great to see you here. There's this kind of automated kind of great, like, hey, no, this relates to this idea, this relates to this idea. And once you, in a way, at the beginning, it feels a bit forced, right? When you do that, when you think about, oh, do I have to connect that now to one idea or one person? But actually, the more you do it, the more it becomes a normal kind of modus of what you're doing. And then you're seeing connections everywhere, because you're like, oh my God, yes, this relates to what I just read yesterday in this book, and da, da, da. And so it's really kind of priming yourself for doing that. Another one that I think is a lot of times underestimated is the way how we ask questions, because we tend to ask these kind of questions like, what do you do, and things that put people into boxes, right? And imagine the situation where you go to a fishing village in Italy, and you meet this fisherwoman, and you ask, what do you do? And she says, I'm a fisherwoman. Well, there's not many overlaps you have, right? There's not many dots you can connect in this. Like, you might be an amazing podcast host, or an amazing professor, like Dorie at Duke, and so on. And you might not have a lot in common when you kind of look at these functional kind of things. But if you would ask her, what do you enjoy doing? Or what is it about the fishing that kind of like you enjoy the most? Whatever you ask that is a bit more open-ended, she might say something like, I love the endlessness of the sea. And you might say, wow, yeah, academia is like this. I sometimes love the endlessness, and sometimes I don't. And so the point is that the more we ask questions that allow people to really go a little bit deeper into what really motivates them and what really kind of they're interested in, the more we can then identify overlaps, because we actually have a lot in common, right? We all go through transitions. We've all lost loved ones. We've all had a collective near-death experience with COVID. We have a lot in common. But if we don't bring that up, we can't really connect those dots. And so I think there's always this kind of two-sided thing. One, for us to learn to connect the dots, but also to allow others to give us some hooks that can connect those dots.
Yeah, I think the hooks is a really valuable strategy, Christian. Thank you for sharing that, because it's right. People are often looking for something desperately, like, oh, what can I say to this person? How can I connect? So I think that giving them more opportunities for it is very valuable. We're here talking with Dr. Christian Busch. He's the author of the new book, Connect the Dots. If you're enjoying this conversation, you can check out Christian's book. Here is the URL. And if you want to make sure you never miss one of our weekly LinkedIn sessions for Newsweek, just go to DorieClark.com. You can sign up for the email list, get a free self-assessment in the process, and you will get reminders about these great weekly conversations, which take place every Thursday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern, and 5 o'clock in London. So, Christian, we've got great questions coming in. And hello, please type into the chat box if you're just joining who you are, where you're dialing in from. Jan is here from Essex, England. Katarina from Vienna. Jessica is here from Sao Paulo. Leilani from California. Farha from India, and many more. Katarina from Zagreb. We're very happy to have you. And a question came in, Christian, that I think is interesting from a LinkedIn user. They want to know, do you think that the serendipity mindset is more favored by certain organizations or cultures? If you're a business leader, for instance, or a business owner, how can you leverage this? How can you make your culture more serendipity friendly?
That's a great question. And I think both in terms of organizational cultures and kind of national cultures, I grew up in Germany, and we love planning, we love structuring, we love kind of mapping things out, and then real life happens, and you're like, oh my God, nobody told me that there's so much ambiguity out there. And so actually, this serendipity mindset for me also has been a bit of a healing force to say, look, let me get used to how the world actually unfolds. But what I find fascinating there is really that, especially when we think about it in the organizational context, where we have that kind of tendency that we assume that planning means having control, right? So if I'm the CEO of a company or the leader or team leader, I want to project like authority and by being able to plan and then stick to my plan, right? So I go into the boardroom and say, this is my plan, and I did exactly what I said. But actually, obviously, we all know that this is just not reality, that this is not possible. And we did a large study actually with the CEOs of top companies who performed really well, especially throughout COVID as well. And one thing that they all have in common is that they're extremely good at saying, hey, here's a certain sense of direction or key curiosity or some kind of sense of where we're going in a bigger sense. Here's an approximate strategy. But I'm telling you already now that as soon as something unexpected comes up, we will actually take that on board. And that's not a threat to our authority. that's actually part of the plan. That's part of a great culture that allows the unexpected to be part of it. And to give you one example there, it's one of my favorites, is the sweet potato washing machine. And so the sweet potato washing machine is, a couple of years ago, a company in China called Haier. They do, they produce refrigerators and washing machines and so on. And they received calls from farmers. And the farmers told them, your crappy washing machine is always breaking down. Well, why is the washing machine breaking down? Cute cat, by the way, Dorie.
Thank you.
And it's luck, no? That if she goes from left to right, is that luck or something like that? So it's good timing.
I think this is Philip's debut appearance in Miami, so it's actually very, very exciting. He had figured out how to steal the thunder in New York City, and now he's learning in Miami exactly how to show off his tail in front of everyone.
Exclusive performance, yes. But so in that case, so the farmers essentially told them, hey, your crappy washing machine is always breaking down. And so, that's unexpected. And that goes against our marketing plan, right? Our marketing plan says that we use washing machines to wash clothes, right? And so usually we would educate the customer probably and tell them, don't wash your potatoes in that washing machine. Now they did the opposite. They said, yeah, there's all these farmers calling and saying that their washing machine breaks down because of the potatoes they are washing in it. Maybe we should just build in a dirt filter and make it a potato washing machine, because there's a lot of farmers in China, right? And so that's how unexpectedly, serendipitously so, the potato washing machine became a new innovation. And so the key thing here, Dorie, to your question is, it's really about how do we create a culture that allows that to happen and doesn't see it as a threat to planning and everything else. And I'm a big fan of very simple things. Like, everyone talks about innovation and change, but nobody really likes it when it's about them, right? Nobody really likes ambiguity and change. And so I'm a big fan of small, like, baby steps. For example, in the weekly meeting, asking things like, what surprised you last week? It surprised you that farmers were washing the potatoes that way? Great. Okay, let's work with it. So it's really legitimizing the unexpected as part of our plan, and then really showcasing that, celebrating it, and remunerating it, embeds it into daily practices that then leads to that kind of innovation and the ability to cultivate serendipity.
I love that. So interesting, Christian, and a great example. And we want to say hi to some of the great folks tuning in. Erez is here from Israel, Motzi from South Africa, Talha from Pakistan, Aaron from New Zealand, and Farah from Colombia. We have an international crowd tuning in to see Dr. Christian Busch, and we're so happy to have you. If you're enjoying the conversation, hit the like button and hit the share button so that all of your friends can join in the fun. And Christian, I love this. This was a good question that came in from our friend Annette. She wants to know, what are your daily rituals that prime your serendipity? Are there things that you do every day that are helpful with this?
That's a great question, and sometimes it's kind of mostly unconscious, that I do these things, I think, nowadays. But a lot of it, I think, has to do with, someone said that earlier in the chat, to be what's the word, kind with your connections and kind with your like introducing people to other people, and really kind of just creating that environment around yourself that in a way multiplies serendipity. Because if I introduce Dorie to an amazing person in Miami and they have an amazing time, and then in spirit I'm at the table all the time, right? And so now next time when something amazing comes up there, and Dorie runs into like an amazing TV producer, they might say, oh my God, yeah, hey, you should talk with this guy who just had this book out. So it's kind of like this thing where I think it's both because it feels right to do it, like that kind of like, it's just a modus operandi. And it's this beautiful karmic almost effect that it has also, that good things, I think, lead to good things. And so I think that's really something that it comes back to what we talked about at the beginning, this Viktor Frankl idea that I find a lot of meaning in connection, and I find a lot of meaning in making meaningful introductions between people, and really always thinking about, like, is there anything I can add to someone else's life? And especially not when I expect something in return, because I think, I think nobody appreciates this idea that they just get contacted when someone needs something from them. And so I think there's a lot in that kind of idea of really building meaningful relationships in general. And then, I think karma usually has its way in a very non-spiritual way. I mean, we could talk about spirituality, I guess, over a glass of wine, but I think in this case, it's really about this idea. And Xavi, thank you for mentioning Adam Grant's book Give and Take. I think that's actually a really good one, maybe just as a side note, right? This idea that I think one thing that Adam talks about is this idea that givers, so people who are very kind of giving, a lot of times, like, find it tough to have boundaries, right? So because people kind of get used to that those people are giving, and then at some point you kind of get burned out. And earlier in life, I certainly had that, where I kind of like was over giving, and I kind of churned myself out. And then at some point, it really helped me to discuss with the wonderful people around me to say, hey, look, like, what is it that you really want to do in life, and with the people who are really close to you, and what is the boundary for this, and that is priority, and then everything else kind of like takes the second fiddle. And I think by doing this, then you can still be extremely giving, but also then find that balance. And I think, Dorie, you're obviously an amazing example also of someone who intuitively is extremely giving, and at the same time really gets a lot of stuff done. And I think that's the kind of really interesting balance that I guess we're all trying to find.
Oh, well, that's very kind of you, Christian. Certainly the same is true of you. And I think it bespeaks an interesting point here. I thought this was a fascinating question. Dean is chiming in, Christian. He wants to know any suggestions on being perceived as creating luck versus being seen as desperate. If we're trying too hard to create luck, people might think, oh my God, what's their problem? So how do we avoid that? How do we walk that line?
Yeah. I think it comes a lot to what is authentic to oneself, right? Because like, Dorie, we've been talking a lot about, there's a lot of tactics that are there to create serendipity, right? We can talk more about those, like how you plant serendipity bombs, how you do all these different types of things where you can cultivate serendipity in some ways. But I think it only really truly is sustainable if it's authentic to oneself. Like if you're the kind of person who really, really, really dislikes XYZ, then yes, by any means, pushing the comfort zone is great. But if it feels not genuine, then there's obviously something that might not be the right thing. And so I'm a big fan actually of, in the Serendipity Journal, where we, as said earlier, we can write down the interests we have in order to use it for our hooks, but also then really writing down, in my past, when did I have moments of serendipity that really felt good, and that really kind of felt in that moment good, and that felt genuine, and so on. And what was the pattern behind this? Was there anything that I did that really led to this, and that really kind of made everyone feel good about it? And then also, like, what were the moments where that didn't happen, and what was it that held me back, or that didn't make it happen? And so the long story short here really is, I think, finding those practices that are truly authentic to one, and versus kind of trying to force too much on it. And I think that's the big shift also with this mindset, to get away from a pitching mindset of like, when you have a conversation with an interesting person, it's guaranteed that that person will have a lot of people pitching to them, right? And so if you're one of 1,000 people who are pitching to that person, you're one of 1,000 people. But if you're the person who just kind of like opens an opportunity space and says, let me cast a couple of hooks, and then let's see what the other person actually is excited about, it's fascinating to see how the most senior of people might then say, oh my God, like I actually wanted to learn more about this. Like, hey, look, let's talk. And so I think it's really about this kind of genuineness in casting these hooks in a way that are not pushy, and really turning that around from a pitch to someone actually connecting the dots themselves because they are interested in it.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because certainly a lot of folks I know have concerns about how to reach out and build relationships with successful people of quote unquote higher status who may be hit up a lot. So I think the serendipity hooks in your strategy that you've outlined is really valuable with that. We want to say hi to some of the folks tuning in here. We have Cleo joining us from Edinburgh. We have Barbara from Norway, Adnan from Turkey, and many more. We're so glad to have all of you. We do this every Thursday, same time, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, 5 o'clock in London. And Christian, I wanted to end with one last question. A great one came in from Maya, and she wants to know, how do you stay away from friends that are negative? They're like serendipity blockers. How do we do that without insulting them? If you've got somebody who's just like not with a program, they're dragging you down, how do you handle that so we can all bring more serendipity into our own lives?
Yeah. That's a great. I mean, thanks so much, Maya. This is really interesting, and it's almost like there's two answers that pop up in my head. One is around that question of, is there anything we can do with them so that they could be kind of quote unquote uplifted in some way? So to give an example, I had a colleague in London. I used to live in London for a long time. And, when I started with serendipity mindset and ideas and yay and so on, and he was like, Christian, I love you. I love this, but like, I don't need this. Like, I'm okay. And like, but like a little bit kind of like this type of person. And then we made a deal. We said, okay, do 2 practices, for the next couple of weeks, ask questions slightly differently, cast a couple of hooks in some conversations, and then let's reconnect. And so he comes back a couple of weeks later and he's like, oh my God, Christian, I didn't know life can be so joyful. And so to me, that was really this thing where I could have said nothing that would have convinced him, right? Like nothing. Like I could have pitched to him about the mindset and everything else as much as I want. But by him trying small behavioral changes and then getting into it and then almost getting addicted to it, that's when he kind of took on and latched on and did more and more and more of this. So my first kind of answer to this is almost like saying, is there something like a nudge that can be done in a kind of nice way? But if it's a given, right? And I think that's something that really can hold people back, obviously, right? Having negativity around and I think that's something that I've certainly seen also a lot in our research of those kind of people who really kind of have a lot of potential, but get held back. And one approach that I've seen that I've felt is really helpful is to really think about the communities one wants to be part of that have that kind of more the positivity part, and then really spending far more time in there, and then over time in a way naturally kind of decreasing the time one spends with those kind of negativity. So it's not like a radical I won't talk with you anymore at all. It's more like, I'm so sorry, I'm really busy this week, like let's check in like in a couple of weeks. And then like, after at some point, like this kind of anyways fades away. And I think that's kind of something that I've seen work, I think, with a lot of the people around me who have had toxic relationships, to really say, look, just disembed after and then hopefully, the other person will be fine too. But again, I think the first approach always, and that's maybe the person in me that always wants to kind of understand what can we do for the other person also, it's really kind of saying, is there something we can first kind of work with the other person with to maybe bring them on the other side. But if that's not possible, then the disembedding might be the other choice.
Well, it's a really great and generous attitude, Christian. I love that. And thank you all for tuning in. Thank you all for your wonderful questions. And thank you especially to Christian Busch for being here. He is the author of the new book, Connect the Dots. If you want to check it out, you can get it in all the bookie places that books are sold. And also you can find out more at his website. Just go to bit.ly, bit-ly/connect dots now. And you can get it right there. Christian Busch, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.